Okay. Okay. I'm not going to start off with the Sedra today, but since we're approaching Rosh Chodesh Adar Rishon, so I would like to discuss about the month of Adar, especially this year when it's a Shana Mu'aberes. The question always comes up. I'm not giving any psakim here. I'm just discussing the shitos, the different opinions. But some years, most years, there's only one Adar. But there are years when there are two Adars. Now, the question always comes up by a Yahrzeit, by a Bar Mitzva. What happens if somebody is born in a year that there's only one Adar? When do you do the Bar Mitzvah? When do you observe the Yahrzeit? Do you observe the Yahrzeit in the first in following years when there are two Adars? Do you observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, or do you observe the Yahrzeit on the second Adar? And the same question arises in regard to a Bar Mitzvah. Let's say a child is born in a year when there's only one Adar. And the question arises, but then his Bar Mitzvah falls out in a year when there are two Adars. So the question is the question is do we observe the Bar Mitzvah in the first Adar, or do we observe the Bar Mitzvah in the second Adar? It comes up into other questions as well. And it's interesting, the Mechaber, the Beis Yosef, who was the authority, the halachic authority for Sephardic Jews, so Rabbi Yosef Karo, so he says that when it comes to Yahrzeit, if somebody died in a year that there was only one Adar, the Yahrzeit is observed in the second Adar. The opinion of the opinion of the Ramah, who was the authority, the primary authority for the customs and the halacha of Ashkenazic Jewry, he paskined that we observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, not in the second Adar. Typically, a Sephardic Jew will observe where they had a parent who passed away in the first Adar, will probably follow the opinion of the Beis Yosef and observe the Yahrzeit in the second Adar. Whereas an Ashkenazic Jew, who typically follows the opinion of the Ramah, will observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar. It should be pointed out, though, that when it comes to Ashkenazic Jews, so very often Hasidim have a tendency to follow the opinion of the Mechaber on certain questions, not in every question. And here too, many Hasidic Jews will observe the Yahrzeit not in the first Adar, but in the second Adar. And there is a third opinion also, and that is the opinion of the Vilna Gaon, of the Ramah, of the Vilna Gaon. And the Gra's opinion was that you should observe the Yahrzeit in both Adars. Simply, I would assume the simple explanation is because both Adars, let's say if somebody died in the fifth of Adar, and a year that there was only one Adar, so that year there would be two anniversaries, so to say, of the commemorating the day of the death. In a sense, to a certain degree, one Adar is a repeat of the previous Adar. So the opinion of the Vilna Gaon is that you should observe the Yahrzeit in both Adars. So now there is a little bit of a problem, because when it comes to Bar Mitzvah, the opinion of the Ramah is that the Bar Mitzvah, if a child was born in a year that there was only one Adar, if a child was born in a year that there was only one Adar, so the Ramah says the Bar Mitzvah is in the second Adar, because when the Bar Mitzvah falls out in the year, that there are two Adars. So the Bar Mitzvah is in the second Adar. Now the question, so there seems to be a contradiction. Why is it that in regard to Yahrzeit, the opinion of the Ramah is that we observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, and when it comes to Bar Mitzvah, we observe it in the second Adar. We observe the Bar Mitzvah. The child is considered a gadol, an adult. He becomes chayiv in mitzvahs. He becomes required in the mitzvahs. He counts for the minyan only in the second Adar. There seems to be a contradiction. Now, I should point out, not everybody agrees with the Ramah on that issue. As a matter of fact, I was told that my great-grandfather, Reb Chaim, he felt that the Bar Mitzvah should be in the first Adar. He felt that the Bar Mitzvah should be in the first Adar. Now, also, I should point out, though, that the Ramah, even though he says the first Adar is the main Adar when it comes to the Yahrzeit, he does suggest that the preferred custom would be for a person to observe the Yahrzeit in both Adars. But he thinks halachically the requirement of observing the Yahrzeit is only in the first Adar, whereas the Vilna Gaon feels that the Yahrzeit should be observed and is almost required to be observed. If the Yahrzeit is required to be observed, it should be observed. The Vilna Gaon's opinion is it's required to be observed in both Adars. Okay, but we're dealing with the question, the contradiction in the Ramah. On one hand, the Ramah is of the opinion that when it comes to Yahrzeit, we observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar. But when it comes to Bar Mitzvah, we observe it in the second Adar. Why is it that way? Now, the simple answer, I think, is that when the first Adar comes, let's say a child who is 13 years old, in a sense, enters his 14th year. So the question is, a child who was born in a year that there was only one Adar. Let's say again, it was the 5th of Adar. And now the 5th of Adar of the first Adar, now he gets Bar Mitzvah this year, let's say, when there are two Adars. So his Bar Mitzvah, the question is, should his Bar Mitzvah be in the first Adar or in the second Adar? And the 5th of which month should his Bar Mitzvah be? At what point is he able to get an aliyah, to go up to the Torah? At what point does it become required in mitzvos? At what point can we count him for the minyan? So the question is, at what point is becoming halachically an adult? So it seems to me that when the 5th of Adar of the first Adar comes, he has already entered the 14th year, but has not yet left his 13th year. So the question is, when to be bar mitzvah, when a person, how do we determine bar mitzvah? Do we determine bar mitzvah on the basis of the fact that he is no longer in his 13th year? Or is bar mitzvah based on the fact that he entered his 14th year? So the Ramah's opinion was that it's true that the Ramah's opinion was that that when it comes to bar mitzvah, so it's not enough to enter the 14th year. You have to have left the 13th year in order to be considered a gadol, in order to be considered halachically an adult. You have to leave the state of childhood, and the person only leaves the state of childhood after his 13th year is over, after he left his 13th year. And if he is simultaneously in his 13th year and his 14th year, he is still not yet considered halachically an adult. Whereas Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim was based on Shitos of Achronim, perhaps Shitos of Rishonim, that no, that once he enters his 14th year, he is considered bar mitzvah. He is considered an adult. So we could understand. So here it's a special halacha. It's a special law that you have to have left a certain period of your life. But that's something that only applies to stages of growth. So it applies to bar mitzvah. It has nothing to do with the question of Yahrzeit. So that's how we could resolve the contradiction in the Ramah. The Ramah's opinion is that the anniversary isn't the main anniversary is in the first Adar. However, the main anniversary is in the first Adar. However, he is still so consequently the bar mitzvah, the Yahrzeit is in the first Adar, because as we'll go into it, whether that's the main date or for other reasons, but when it comes to being bar mitzvah, a person has to have left completely the stage of childhood, and he cannot be considered an adult until he completely leaves the state of childhood. Now, in order to understand this, we have to take notice of a machlokus. There is a discussion in the Gemara in the Adar. If somebody takes an oath to do something by a certain date in Adar, but he doesn't stipulate which Adar, or to do some, and the same thing is in shtaros, in contracts. If somebody has responsibilities till a certain date in Adar, or to do something by a certain date in Adar, and he doesn't stipulate in the contract which day of Adar, but the year is stipulated, and it turns out that it's a year that there are two Adars. So halachically, when he just says Adar without stipulating which Adar it is, which Adar is it considered to halachically have the status of being that date? And there's a machlokes in the Gemara between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that the main Adar is the first Adar. So if a person in the contract says that he is, if a person in the contract says that he'll do something by this date of Adar, so according to Rabbi Yehuda, or he will do something until this date of Adar. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, halachically it's considered a stipulation regarding the first Adar. Because Rabbi Yehuda says, at least in regard to oaths and vows and contracts, when the term Adar is used without a stipulation of which Adar we're talking about, so we're talking about the first Adar. Whereas Reb Meir's opinion is that we're talking about the second Adar. So many commentators assume, not everybody, but many commentators assume that the argument is over this point. Which Adar is the main Adar? Is the main Adar the first Adar, or the main Adar is the second Adar? That is the argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir. And most Rishonim, most of the poskim, most of those who are decisors of halacha, of the early commentaries, they say that the main Adar, they paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that the main Adar is the first Adar, whereas the Rambam is of the opinion that we paskin like Reb Meir, that the main Adar is the second Adar. Now, so it seems, and this is what is so it seems the Mechaber seems to paskin like the Rambam that the main Adar, the Beis Yosef, who was the decisive halacha of the Sephardic Jews, seems to paskin, or his opinion could be based, but that's a separate question, on the fact that he follows the opinion of the Rambam, which is not so clear, that the main Adar is the second Adar. So therefore, he's of the opinion that the Yahrzeit is always on the second Adar. That's the opinion. However, the Chassam Sofer points out that it could be that both Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir would agree that the main Adar really is the second Adar. And the whole argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Meir is in terms of the understanding of the word Adar. Does the common usage of the word Adar, when people use the word Adar, do they mean the first Adar or they mean the second Adar? What is the assumption that it means? But objectively, halachically, it could be, the Chassam Sofer says, that all the Tanoim and all the Amoraim were of the opinion that the main Adar is the second Adar. So therefore, the opinion of the Chassam Sofer, and this is also, it could be that this is the opinion of the Mechaber, that according to all opinions, objectively, the main Adar is the second Adar. The main Adar is the second Adar. That's why the custom of Sephardic Jews, and seemingly the custom of many Hasidim, even though they come from Ashkenazic background, but they adopted so many Sephardic practices. So their custom is to observe the Yahrzeit in the second Adar, to observe the Yahrzeit in the second Adar. There are those that observe both Adars also. Now however, the Chassam Sofer offers another reason why he feels we should observe the second Adar, and this is based on a halacha that's mentioned in the Gemara in Megillah. The Gemara in Megillah talks about if Tisha B'Av falls out on a Shabbos, so the halacha is that the fasting of Tisha B'Av, if Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos, of course you can't fast on Shabbos. Only Yom HaKippurim we fast on Shabbos. So Tisha B'Av. So the question is, should the fast of Tisha B'Av be observed in the prior week, or should the first fast of Tisha B'Av be observed on Sunday of the following week? And the Gemara says, as we know, that's the general custom. Of course, we observe Tisha B'Av on the Sunday of the following week. Why? Because when it comes to perennials, when it comes to commemorating a tragedy, we always postpone. We don't do it earlier. And it's easy to understand the reason for that. Because tragedy is something that we don't want to identify, that we're looking forward, commemorating it. So we postpone the fasting of Tisha B'Av. And the same thing, as Rashi points out, is true about Shavasa B'Tammuz and Asara B'Teves as well. We postpone it. We don't do it earlier. So he says, Yahrzeit, the Chassam Sofer says, that's a tragedy. That's commemorating a tragedy. That's commemorating the day that a close relative died. And because it's commemorating a day that a close relative died, so we should use Tisha B'Av, which is the day of tragedy of the Jewish people, as the blueprint. And consequently, if we have to choose between 2 days, between the 5th, let's say if the person died the 5th of Adar in a year, that there was only one Adar, so we should postpone it to the second Adar, because if we have to choose between days to commemorate a tragedy, we should choose the later date. We should choose the later date. That is what the Chassam Sofer says. However, as I pointed out, the Ramah opinion, the opinion of the Ramah, who was codified the laws, the customs of Ashkenazic Jewry, he felt that on the contrary, that we observe it on the second. We accept it on the first Adar. On the first Adar. Why? First, we could say, perhaps he rejects the opinion. When I say he, I'm not talking necessarily specifically about the Ramah himself. I'm talking about those who have that same shita, that same practice as he had. So first of all, he was of the opinion that we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, that the main Adar is the first Adar. Since the main Adar is the first Adar, so if we have to choose between which Adar to observe, to commemorate the Yahrzeit, to commemorate the passing of a relative, so we do it on the first Adar. Now, the Trumas Hadeshin, who is one of the Rishonim, he also follows this opinion, but he adds an additional reason. And the additional reason he gave is, he says that there's a halacha of ein ma'avrin ala mitzvos. You don't pass over a mitzvah. A mitzvah that comes to you, you do right away. Let's say, we know halachically, a person should put on the talis before he puts on the tefillin. But let's say by mistake, a person takes out his tefillin first, not thinking, absent-mindedly. So many poskim say he puts on the tefillin first, because once you're holding the tefillin in your hand, you don't put the tefillin aside unless there is a really special reason. In other words, we know that we put on the tefillin shel yad before the tefillin shel rosh for whatever reason. So we paskin. Let's say somebody by mistake takes out of his tefillin bag the tefillin shel rosh first, then we wouldn't say it, because the halacha is you have to put on the tefillin shel yad first, the tefillin of the arm first. But by the talis, it's just the question. There is no real reason why one should be before the other. So we put on the talis first. But if a person will take the tefillin, will take the tefillin first. So then we take the tefillin first. You put the tefillin on before the talis. Okay. Now so there's a special halacha of ein ma'avrin ala mitzvos. We don't pass over mitzvos. A mitzvah that comes to your hands, you do it right away. You do the mitzvah right away. You don't pass over it. Okay, so the Trumas Hadeshin says here too. He said you have two Adars. And which Adar comes first? The Adar that comes first is the first Adar, obviously, by definition. So the fifth of the first Adar comes before the fifth of the second Adar. And both of them are anniversaries, or anniversaries of the day a close relative passed away. And there is a mitzvah that are associated with the day, with the anniversary that a relative passed away. Many people fast. Some give tzedakah. So he says, ein ma'avrin ala mitzvos. When it comes to mitzvos, you don't push aside. If the fifth of the first Adar comes and you don't observe it then to a certain degree, you're pushing it over. Consequently, you should observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, because we don't want to push off the observance of the Yahrzeit. That's what the Trumas Hadeshin says. And I want to focus on this question. After all, there was a very good argument given by the Chassam Sofer. After all, when it comes to Peranios, when it comes to tragedy, so we postpone. Yes, ein ma'avrin al mitzvos, but when it comes to tragedy, we postpone. So here too, maybe we should postpone, not do it earlier. And I want to suggest there are a number of possible explanations why we won't apply. Why we won't apply ein ma'avrin al. Why we won't apply about postponing a tragedy here. But I want to suggest to discuss one explanation now, and that is we have to understand the nature of Yahrzeit. What is a Yahrzeit? What is a Yahrzeit? Yahrzeit, we fast. The Gemara mentions that the Gemara mentions the kiyom shemeis bo aviv, kiyom sheyeis bo rabo, that there was a custom people accepted upon themselves in the time of the Gemara to fast on the day of the passing of their parent, to fast on the day of the passing of their teacher, of their Rabbi. So fasting is one custom that is associated with Yahrzeit. Giving tzedakah on a particular day is associated with it. Saying Kaddish is associated with it. But we have to understand the essence. We have two types of fast days. We have on one hand something like Yom Kippur, and we have Tisha B'Av. And there are many similarities between Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, but in their essence, they're completely different. They're completely different. Tisha B'Av is a day of mourning. Of all the days of the Jewish calendar, there is no day more dedicated to mourning than Tisha B'Av. Yom Kippur, on the other hand, which shares almost all of these halachas that Tisha B'Av has, there are certain differences, is on the contrary. According to some mitzvah shitos, there's even a mitzvah of being happy. Not happy in the sense of eating and drinking, chas v'shalom, but internal happiness. But what is Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur in its essence is a Yom Tshuva. It's a day of repentance, a day of fixing one's character, a day of correcting our way of living. That's what Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a day of asking for forgiveness, of changing our ways. And I think to a certain degree that this perhaps could be the argument between those who apply the law of we postpone a tragedy in regard to Yahrzeit, and those who say that a Yahrzeit is a mitzvah that we do the first chance we have to observe it. And we don't push it aside and don't postpone it to another time. I think the opinion of the Ramah. Well, I shouldn't say the opinion of the Ramah. The opinion of some of those who had the same practice as the Ramah, that we observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, like the Truma suggestion says, because we don't want to push a mitzvah aside. And for some reason, we don't apply the halacha of pushing aside a commemoration of tragedy. He doesn't see Yahrzeit so much as a day of Avelus, as a day of mourning, but he sees it primarily as a day of tshuva. Whereas those who are of the opinion that Tisha B'Av should be, that Yahrzeit should be observed in the second month because it's a day of tragedy and consequently is postponed, they see Yahrzeit as a form of Avelus, as a form of mourning, that we mourn in the same way as the Jewish people mourn on Tisha B'Av the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. So I think that this is the machlokes. If it's a day of tshuva primarily, and not a day of mourning, so then on the contrary, so we don't postpone it. Ein ma'avrin ala mitzvos. We don't ignore the mitzvah. We don't go over the mitzvah. We don't postpone it. Mitzvah haba liyadcha. The pasuk says, "You shmartem es hamatzos." You shall watch the matzos. Make sure that the dough doesn't rise. You don't postpone. You have to bake it as quick as possible. And Rashi mentions a drasha, "Ushmartem es hamitzvos." You have to watch the. You have to watch the mitzvah. Not only the dough can't become chametz, you can't postpone the mitzvah either. You have to fulfill the mitzvah as soon as you can. Mitzvah haba liyadcha, mitzvah that comes to your hand, al tachmitzena. Consequently, we observe the Yahrzeit. We observe the Yahrzeit in the first. We observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar. We observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar. So, since we observe the Yahrzeit in the first Adar, so because of that, because we encounter the first Adar, let's say the fifth of the first Adar, if that's the Yahrzeit, we encounter it before we encounter the fifth of the second, and we don't want to postpone it. Whereas the Shita of the Beis Yosef is that it's a day of tragedy, and since it's a day of tragedy, so we postpone it. Now, I think now the question is why is it specially, according to the Ramah? Why is it a day? Why is it a day of mitzvah, a day of tshuva? Why specifically is it a day of tshuva? But I think the reason it's a day of tshuva is because there is a halacha brought down. It's brought down in the Rambam. It's brought down in the Gemara, that a person is required to do tshuva on the day he dies. And since no person knows of the day that he is going to die, so because of that, a person has to do tshuva every day. But the basic halacha is that a person has to do tshuva on the day he dies. And we, in a sense, we could suggest that according to the Ramah, or those who have the sheet of the Ramah, can't say that the Ramah himself was based on that. The Ramah might have been based on the fact that the first Adar is the main Adar. But those who have the opinion of the Ramah, their feeling was that the children, the relatives who observe the Yahrzeit are taking over or continuing the mitzvah that was imposed on their father or their mother, on their parent, on their relative, on their Rabbi, whatever it is. They assume that responsibility of continuing in that, in assuming the role that the deceased relative had a responsibility to fulfill. And we have to understand what is the reason for this. Now, it's interesting. By Egla Rufa, they would say, where they found a dead body between two cities, and no one, and they measured with the dead body was close to one of the cities, and so the halacha of Egla Rufa. I don't want to go into the details of that halacha right now, but the halacha of Egla Rufa was that everybody had to, the members of Bezdin came out, and there was the Zikneir, they would say, Kapra Lamcha Yisrael, you give kapara, give atonement to your nation, the Jewish people. Asher Padisa, who you redeemed, who were taken out of the land of Egypt. And the Medrash says, Kapra Lamcha Yisrael, redeem the Amcha Yisrael, Hachayim v'Hamesim. We have to give kapara, not just for the living, because here somebody was murdered, and we don't know who the murderer was. And in a sense, there is a communal responsibility. So we say, Kapra Lamcha Yisrael, atonement for your nation Israel. Asher Padisa, even those who were taken out of Egypt. Someone was killed thousands of years later, and there was a dead body found. And we ask God for atonement. And we ask not just for ourselves, but for our ancestors. Hachayim v'Hamesim, those who passed away already. But not only for them, all the way back to the generation of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the generation of the Jewish people who went out of Egypt. Doesn't seem to make sense. And to a certain degree, we do that every year when we say Vidui. When we say Vidui, we say Aval anachnu v'avoseinu. I know there's some people who took out that the sentence. Aval anachnu v'avoseinu chatanu. We and our ancestors sinned. We say chatanu mikolam, boshnu mikol dor. So that's I'll get into that. But the Avalam Anachnu Vavosenu Chatanu, we're saying vidui for our ancestors. How are we to understand that? First of all, what good is the vidui for our ancestors? Why do we have to say vidui for our ancestors? And what good is it? But if you take a look in Parshas Kiseitze, so the Torah tells us about, according to the way Rashi explains it, Aveira goreris Aveira and mitzvah goreris mitzvah. One sin causes another sin, and one Aveira, and one mitzvah causes another mitzvah. And in explaining it, the Torah talks there about Yifas Toar. A soldier, if someone goes out into war, doesn't apply to all wars, certain wars, and he's enticed by a woman who is from the enemy, from the side of the enemy, and he marries her. She's converted, then he marries her, and then he has two wives. And what very often happens with marriages that are based on a momentary enticement, but after the passage of time, one of the wives, becomes the snua, the one who is not loved, the one who's not liked, sometimes even the one who is hated. And afterwards, the Torah tells us the snua will have a child. So you have to be careful that you do not ignore the child when it comes to inheritance. And then the Torah tells us about somebody having a child that is a ben Sora or Mora, a rebellious son. An rebellious son does crimes that ultimately become capital offenses. And the Chazal tell us, the sages tell us, that this is Aveira Goreris Aveira. This is one sin causing another sin. First he became enticed, and even though the Torah permitted him to marry the lady after he converted her, but it's not something that the Torah preferred that he do. But Dibra Torah Keneged Yetzirah, the Torah recognized what sometimes happens in time of war. We should realize on what a high level the soldiers of Israel are. You see what the animals of Hamas did. And you see how the soldiers of Israel acted. How different it is. The world finds fault with the Jew because they want to hide October 7th. And that's why they claim that the Jewish people are trying to annihilate everybody there. Why? Because they want to make a smoke screen. And then they say that it's disproportionate. The whole argument of disproportionate is based on revenge. In other words, I have a right, the first nation has a right to go in and kill as many people as they kill. The other nation might have justification if they go in and kill the exact same amount. What is that found? It's a foundation of revenge. It's not based on the fact that the second nation is going in self-defense to make sure it's not prevented again. Those who give that argument, even though, of course, they would do much worse, but they see it, they recognize that people will accept the possibility of vengeance. They use vengeance as an excuse of self-defense, as a smokescreen. So October 7th, they want to hide October 7th. And the other nations that come out against Israel, they're using their charges against Israel, not just to cover this up, but to cover up what was done to the Jewish people during World War II, during the Holocaust. The more fault they can find, that they think that they can find, that they can make up about the Jewish people, will remove their guilt, their collective guilt, for allowing what happened in World War II. So so we see what war does, but you see how the Jewish soldiers acted. You see, look at the difference. But the world doesn't want to look at the difference. They want to create differences, other types of differences. We could say, Ru man bein beni ubein chami. As Leah said, look at the difference between Reuven and Esav. We should point out the differences. Show who were the barbarians. And to show that they're trying to eliminate the Jewish people from defending themselves. They want to open the opportunity for Hamas to come in and repeat time and time again what they did already in October 7th. So this is but why? The natural, so the Jewish soldiers that we have today, they are able to overcome what very often happens in war. But but Avera Goreres Avera, but when soldiers are not able to do that, that leads to sneya, to having a bad attitude to one's wife, and having a bad attitude to the children of that wife, and that leads to the sin of the Ben Sora Mora, to the sin of the son, the rebellious son. And the question is, the rebellious son is another person. The rebellious son is another person. How is this? Avera Goreres Avera. One sin causes another sin. Avera Goreres Avera means I do one sin. That will give me an attitude that will lead me to do another sin, to do a third sin, to do a fourth sin. But the answer is, when I sin and my sinful ways has an impact on others and leads others, even future generations, so I bear some responsibility also. Of course, the future generations have to bear responsibility for what they did. And they have to realize that their ancestors also made mistakes. Because I'll tell us that any generation that the Beis HaMikdash was not rebuilt, it would have been destroyed in their generation. That means the sins of our ancestors of that time has continued throughout the generations. And perhaps by us, not perhaps, in all likelihood, many of these sins are more severe for us because we saw what happened. We should learn from the past. We have to recognize that just because we're used to it, just because it existed before, and sometimes the former generations that sinned, to a certain degree, they were in a different situation, not like us. But the harm was done. And it could be sometimes they had no way of knowing. But once they did it, somehow that had an impact on future generations. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm certainly not going to blame our ancestors. But sometimes when we look back, we realize things that they didn't realize and perhaps they couldn't realize. How is it that former generations did not react in America during the Holocaust? There are excuses. There are reasons. Many of them were immigrants. They were scared. But we became used to it. How could anybody suggest we shouldn't protest the murder of our brothers and sisters? Apparently, we're used to it. They might have had reasons, but we don't have those reasons. But we're used to it. So, and it's not just in the negative. I remember that I was a freshman in high school at the time, and I was attending the Yahrzeit share that my uncle gave and the Agadata, Halacha, that had to do with the mess, Halachas of mess, but and the end of the Agadata, I think it might have been written up in one of the Svarim, but at the end of the Agadata, my uncle said that in the beginning of Parshas Veschanan, Moshe makes his tefillah, makes his prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to please let him go into Eretz Yisrael. Veschanan al Hashem Beis Lemor, Hashem Elokim, Atah chilos laharos es avdecha es godlecha v'eshadcha chazokta. You began to show your greatness, your strong hand. Hashem mikil b'shemai baritz asher yaskim v'seh. Ebrina, please let me go over, cross and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, the good mountain and the Lebanon. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu became angry at me by Yisaber Hashem Bi'lamanchem below Shama Alai. He didn't listen to me. By Yomer Hashem Alai Ravlach Al Tosaf Daber Ol Vadavaseh Ale Rosh Hapiska. Go up on top of the mountain. V'soy necha Yoma v'tzafona v'teimana mizracha, and look all around. And look with your ear, with your eyes. Kilo savars Yarden say you're not going to. And the way I recall the question, I might have it wrong, but the way I recall, question was, why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer him right away? You're not going, no, Moshe. But instead, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, go up to the mountain and look at the land of Eretz Yisrael. Look at all parts of the land. And then he says, because you're not going to. He should have answered first. You're not going to enter the land. I'm rejecting your request. Why was it that way? And at that time, my uncle said that, I remember he quoted Rav Kook, Elokai Achmu Litzarti Eni Chidai, V'achshav Shenitzarti Kilo Nitzarti. My God, until I was created, I wasn't worth anything. But now that I was created, it's like I wasn't created. Rav Kook says, every person has a mission in life. And each person can fulfill that mission at the time that he was created. My uncle actually deviated a little bit, I think, from Rav Kook's pshat. But when in our Vitui, unfortunately, we do not fulfill the mandates of our mission. And Moshe Rabbeinu, why did he want to go to Eretz Yisrael? Because Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to fulfill his mission. His mission was to take the Jewish people and to bring them, to take them through the Midbar, to give them the Torah, take them through the Midbar, and to bring them into Eretz Yisrael. He wasn't asking just to be a tourist. He wanted to complete his mission. And the Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went on top of the mountain, and God showed him all of Eretz Yisrael, he pointed out to him the different events that are going to take place in the different parts of Eretz Yisrael throughout the generations. He saw the future events, the good events, the tragic events. My uncle said, God said to Moshe, Moshe, you want to complete your mission? He says, your mission will not be completed, even if you enter Eretz Yisrael. For you to fulfill your mission, you have to go. In the future, every year, every event, every tragedy that overtakes the Jewish people, and every joy that overtakes the Jewish people, you have to build the Beis HaMikdash, and you have to fight their wars for you to fulfill their mission. But no man finishes their mission in life. But it's their children and their students and those that are close to them that have to assume the responsibility of continuing the missions. Everybody has an eternal an eternal mission, but no person is able to fulfill that eternal mission. And it comes the responsibility of those who come after them to fulfill that mission. And this, he showed him the land of Eretz Yisrael, but as the Medrash says, in showing him the land of Eretz Yisrael, he showed all the future events that were going to take over the Jewish people. So no person fulfills their mission. Even though it wasn't their fault, but their mission was not completed. They didn't. Sometimes the mission wasn't completed because of the environment that they had, because of the influence, because of the past experience. Why is it that so many great people, we can have 20/20 vision, but they didn't have 20/20 vision? at the time of the Holocaust. And they advised people not to leave. Perhaps it wasn't their fault. They're only human beings. But we should learn from that experience. We should learn from the experience how important it is for the Jewish people to have a place that's safe. We have to learn our responsibility. I'm not talking about everybody serving in the army. That's a different issue. But we have a responsibility, we, the Jews of America, to help them as much as possible, to apply political pressure, to attend the demonstrations, to let the politicians know we will hold them responsible. Our parents, our ancestors, perhaps didn't have some of the opportunities that we had. And because of that, they weren't able to accomplish. But we have to recognize that sometimes, in certain areas, we have a greater ability. Right now, America is still a free country. Even though people screaming that everybody else is trying to take away the freedom to cover up for what they're doing, we have to use this opportunity, the opportunity that our ancestors did not have, and the knowledge that they didn't have. Jews survived pogroms, one pogrom after another pogrom. Who could have thought that the Holocaust there would be no survival? Who could have thought that? Chatanu, the Gemara says, is a mistake. They made mistakes, and perhaps their mistakes were not as great as our mistakes. They didn't have the knowledge, the experience that we have. We have to do tshuva for them in order to recognize the mistakes that they made, perhaps not knowing, not realizing, not having the ability to know. But we do have that ability. We have that ability to help out. So we say, we can't be used to the old situation. We have to use the power, the ability that we have as a result of the new situation. And this is the idea. We have to recognize that besides our own mission, we have the mission of our ancestors. We have the mission of former generations. And especially today, when the Jewish people find themselves in so much trouble, in so much war, we cannot repeat the mistake of our ancestors. And for us, it's a much bigger mistake than it was for them. They didn't know, they didn't realize. We should know, and we should realize. I'm going to have to go, so I'll leave it here, okay?
Okay, so we'll record the answers next week. No. Well, one question was, what if it actually happened 2 months ago? What if there's the Yahrzeit was in a month when there was 30 days, and this year the month only has 29 days? When do you keep the Yahrzeit?
So generally, so the general practice is to observe the first day of that. Now, by Adar, there's a machlokes between the Magen Avram and the Machzis HaShekel about it. So that's, but generally, the general custom is to observe the next day. The next day, that's the general custom. Rosh Chodesh, so to say.
Okay, so have a good week, everyone. I'm sorry you don't have times right now for the questions, but I'll try to get the answers during the week.
Okay, all right, I'll be in touch. Bye-bye.